Here. All right, so we are live now. We got a few more people, hopefully, who will be popping in on the Hangout very shortly if they get it into the correct link and everything. But welcome again. I'm going to start by sharing my screen. You guys can kind of follow along with me on the class notes because there's a bunch of things I'm just going to be ripping through pretty quick here. So I'm going to go start sharing my screen. It's going to look a little crazy here for a second. I'm going to bring these two things up. Oops, wrong thing. Boom and boom. Okay, so the first things I can see you guys are all on there here is we're going to look at the couple of themes from the grants overall that I saw. The first one here is digital citizenship versus technology skills. First of all, overall, everybody did a really good job on their grants. Very impressed, with a lot of the different things that everybody was submitting, and there were several. Today I'm not going to officially announce because I want to do just a little bit more kind of digging into it. But one of the things I will say is all the grants were fairly close. Looks like we just got somebody else popping in on this, did we? Did someone else just pop in? No, apparently not. Oh, someone else just popped in. But anyway, back to what I was saying is all around pretty good grants. I would say that as a class, your ratings were probably, in general, were higher than the ratings that I gave to everyone. And that's good because then when we look at the averages of those, which is one of the things I'll go over here in a little bit, it kind of averages out, and any of the ones that are sort of excessively high or excessively low, that kind of gets factored out in a sense, and I'll kind of speak to that here in a little bit. But the first thing I want to kind of point out, one thing that I think people can do to improve their grants is, I saw in a lot of grants people talking about like working on technology skills and things like that. And one of the things, instead of saying sort of like technology skills, which is just sort of general and slightly, it's not a very specific thing, and there's so many things that are technology skills that it's hard to really boil it down to. We want our students to improve, so I think that replacing technology skills with digital citizenship and kind of focusing on some of those things like how to conduct yourself online and things like that. And I did see that, like components of that in the grants, but I think identifying it specifically as like technology skills can work a little bit better. And then the other thing kind of to go along with that, it kind of falls under the same umbrella, is rather than saying like internet skills, really focus in on those research skills and then make them sort of grade specific for what you're doing. So if you have like lower grades, maybe you're just talking about the difference between ads and regular sites, or don't just type in your information, if a site says it will give you an iPad and things like that. So again, kind of focusing in on digital citizenship and research skills. And then another one is kind of on this third line here, specific skills versus general skills. One of the things I saw, again, in the objectives, like some of you had very, very specific skills that you were going to work on, and then some had very general skills. And this is kind of a hard thing to do in a grant because obviously you want it to be very inclusive and include a lot of things. But the more specific you can get in your focus, and I think that general skills is kind of where like people say technology skills or internet skills. Those are too general. So if you can kind of dial in on those a little bit and focus in on what are students going to gain from this. So if they're able to become better researchers, if they're able to conduct themselves better online, that certainly helps. So for the moment here, I'm going to flip back over to you guys. Stop for a second here. And does anybody have any like thoughts, questions on just sort of the things you want to add to the grant experience of writing the grant and then even analyzing all the other grants? What are some things that you saw that worked for you? I'm going to pick on somebody if nobody offers anything here. So, all right, Kevin, what was valuable for you in the grant experience, either writing or analyzing others?
Well, it seems like you're just trying to give your own sales pitch. I don't know, I like the idea of, when I was reading other people's, I was really pretty envious because they were able to kind of condense, with their subjective measures and everything. And it really, you could see like the long lasting impact of it. And it's like not just on the classroom, but on the entire educational community. Whether I really liked, and one of my favorite ones was the musical Hands, and maybe that's because I like music, I'm a musician myself. But like I really enjoyed that one. It doesn't involve a lot of tech, but still, it really would change the whole scope of education in that community. Not yet alone the what's the other one? It was like the conference or something. That was pretty good.
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of those I liked how grants don't always have to be, oh, I'm looking for new stuff. It's I'm looking for ways to improve our educational communities. So.
Yeah, and I would agree there. I think that probably one of the key components is, people don't want to give away just stuff. They want to see what impact is it having, and that's where I think kind of bringing in that community component. How is this benefiting our school community? How is this making our students better learners? I think that's kind of one of the key components. Does anybody else have any thoughts on some of the things that they saw? Brian?
Yeah, I thought Kevin's. I assume Kevin's is the IPVO one. I just assumed that.
Yeah.
I thought I rated that the highest. I thought that was one of the best because of the specific or the suggestive measures, the specificness of the suggestive measures. So
Yeah, and
went over the population of the school really well. But I think that's one place where the musical Hands missed, because it was an Indian reservation school, but they didn't talk about how poor they were or any issues they had or why music would help their school out at all.
yeah, and I agree with you on Kevin's. That was a real strength in yours, Kevin, was the definitely the focus on very specific. And one of the things I really liked, and this is one, it wasn't something completely fleshed out on the judging elements of the rubric, but it was kind of in the explanation. I guess it was, they're sort of in there, is having like, you really laid out like, here are specific things that we will do with these. And they were specific things that could be applied to a lot of different areas. The fact like when students would make political cartoons and then they could use the cameras to sort of show their political cartoons, or teachers could write on things, on maps and things. And I thought that was a really strong individual way, and that really allows people who are reading the grant to say, okay, I can see how this is really being used.
Sweet. So I get the grant.
Excuse me?
So I get
You
the
get the
grant.
grant?
I actually could use some of them.
Well, we're getting to that. I actually do. There is a winner that was voted by the class as one of that came up multiple times as one of the top ones, and I'm tempted to reveal that now, but I might wait on that a little bit because there's a few things I want to show too. Katie, any things that you noticed?
No, I agree with the guys that there like the music one in the conference, and I'm into music too, but I thought that they were very creative, and I think that you could implement those two grants, like, I mean, obviously, and especially in high school. And I really liked Brian's grant, was the literacy one, I think. I just thought that his kind of encompassed, I think he had like Chromebooks and a few other little things that he could use in the elementary school, and I thought kind of had like not a broad range of things that he could do in the classroom. So, and he had good objectives too that he could implement as well. So, but and I just liked the grant practice, because I'm probably gonna write some grants when I'm in a teacher too. So this was really good practice, and it was really overwhelming for me at first because I didn't know what to add and how in depth to go. So all the feedback will be helpful in the future too.
Yeah, I thought yours had some really strong community components. Because didn't you have like some of the ESL stuff in there too?
Yeah.
As I recall.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was like a really strong component, and that's kind of where like I think one of my suggestions was maybe even make that a stronger focus. You kind of take like there's all these things that you want to do with it, and those are the things that you want to share. That there's a lot of things that we can do with this, and then kind of in that explanation component, if you really flesh out like here's an example of something we can really focus on, and here's what it looks like in a day of the classroom. And so it's almost kind of like, I think I put on a comment on yours that you want to paint a picture of what this looks like. Not just like these are the overall concepts that we want to do and we want to work with families, but like specifically, kid gets the Kindle, he's going to use this app for this, and then he's going to work with his parents on this specific thing, and kind of give that. And it doesn't have to be like a super long thing, but just kind of an overview so that someone's peeking in and they can kind of get an idea of what it looks like. I think that makes it a little stronger sometimes, because I'm always looking for like specifics. I mean, I think back to one of the best pieces of advice that I ever got in terms of writing is to write something that no one else can write. And I sort of think about that when I'm writing a grant, is how can I write this so that no one else could have written this grant? Because if they're getting 10 grants of people asking for Chromebooks or Kindle Fires or IPVOs or whatever it may be, what is it that about this particular grant is special? How does it differentiate itself from any other grant? So, anybody else, Todd or Amanda, do you guys have anything that you wanted to add to this?
I think along what you were saying, what do you have to do to differentiate yourself? That was the big thing. After a while, they all kind of started looking like they were cookie cutter grants.
Yeah, and that it's a tough thing to really do that sometimes. I know that's one of the things that I always try and do is if I know that a lot of people are going to be asking. I think I mentioned this before my goal was just to get Chromebooks, more Chromebooks in our classroom. But I really made the grant. I focused it on makerspace stuff for one of those NETA grants, and I think that really helped sell it a little bit more. So, and again, I think the other thing that I noticed too with these is there's a lot of strength in all of the grants. Just a second, I gotta write a quick email to Oliver. He's trying to get in here. But I thought all of the grants are very fundable, and obviously every single grant and every grant that I write has things that you can clean up about it and make it better, and things. And you could endlessly have different people look at it and make a zillion comments to make it better. But I think a lot of it is if you just have this idea, you write it, and then you send it in, you're doing a lot more than a lot of other people are doing. And so the mere fact of taking the time to do it and send it in, that automatically puts you a step ahead of 90% of teachers out there. So Amanda, did you have anything last that you wanted to add?
I just thought the overall experience is really good. I didn't know exactly how to organize it, so that was my biggest thing, is how to organize a grant and get all my thoughts into it, and make it clear what I need and why I need it. So, but it was a good experience having to write it.
Yeah, and essentially it's just a big lesson plan. I mean, in a sense, this is what we're trying to accomplish. This is how we're going to do it, and that's kind of what you do. So I got one email I'm going to respond to, but does anybody else have anything to add really quick?
Well, I think all the grants had a lot of strengths to them. That's why I think I rate all of them high. There were so many great ideas, and I came and sadly remember some of them, but there were some just really, really good ones. Whether it was Brian, if you were the one who did the literacy one, I thought that was really good too. I put that in my top 3. Just a lot of great ideas all around. So those are some projects I'd like to see implemented in the classroom.
Cool.
Obviously, that exercise ball was probably the worst one, but I think because it lacks so much of the specifics.
What I liked about that one is it had a good idea to start. I just think I could have been meted out a little bit, but I like how that makes sense. The way that it was explained and there was research to kind of back it up. I liked that. It was
definitely a strength.
Brian.
Just to kind of keep things moving, I think we could probably talk about this all day, but I'm going to kind of keep the agenda going here a little bit and share my screen again. I'm going to present this to everyone with this little click here.
Why is it just me?
Is yours showing up on the screen? Oh, there. Sorry, I got to click here. There we go. Is that showing up for you guys?
Yeah.
All right, good. So the next thing I kind of want to go on to is just general stats. And I'm going to go over a few elementary just items here just to kind of review. I think this is one area that is often skipped over in sort of just teacher education programs in general. But I think just kind of a review of statistics and then how you can apply some of these statistical things that you probably learned about like in like 8th grade or something, how you can apply it to assessing students and different things like that. So first of all, you know, the mean, and as I'm going to flip over to this little spreadsheet over here, these are actually the scores from the different grants in no particular order. And so the mean obviously is just the average of all the scores, and this does give you a strong overview of where the different grants are. And we can actually see here that as we go across the...
Whoa.
He left.
Amanda, I'm trying to give you a headwear, but I don't know how to do it.
Put that
I
on
need to
purpose.
give myself one.
How do you do
You
that,
go like
Margie?
to effects.
Can I just drag it?
We should all have effects when he
Oops,
comes
I
back.
apologize, Amanda. That was me. There we go. How do you do hats?
Oh my. What's going on?
No.
Oh. Thanks, guys.
Ah!
That's the best
Oh,
thing ever.
shoot.
Anyway, what's this? I'm just pressing buttons. I don't know what's going on.
Let me see.
There it is.
How do you?
I don't want to put this on my head, please. I'm trying to get the mohawk thing. It's not working. Oh.
Alright, I'm back here, guys. Sorry about that. I think I got it. I'm back. Hey, everybody good? I see everybody.
Yeah.
They're just going crazy with the
We were
stuff.
pretty fast
I don't know how long I was off. When did you guys get the cutoff for me here?
Like a
going-
minute ago.
Or
What was I talking about when I got cut off?
you're going over the mean.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so the mean in general, did you guys see the stats that I was kind of showing on that from the grants?
Oops. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'm going to go back to the screen share here, and hopefully this will not cut me off again here. There we go. I'm going to click present to everyone. There we go. Okay. So now we're... Okay, so what I was kind of pointing out with regard to the, and I got this little drawing to kind of share with you a basic outline here, is if we have all, here's like sort of a line, and then I'm going to put a bunch of dots in here just to kind of show you. So we can have a bunch of these dots, and these just represent all data points. And this is what I want to show you where sometimes the mean can actually give you a false impression of what's going on. So if we added up all these, we would say, hey, our middle ground is somewhere, you know, like right in here. Okay, there's like our middle ground. Are you guys seeing this image all right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to change the color on that one. So let me highlight that so it's a little darker here. So if we had like these 5 data points, that's where our mean would be kind of pretty close to the middle there. But if I take this same thing here, I'm going to just highlight all these, copy and paste it here, pull this down, and if I just do one thing like this, and I pull this over, and I have one really low score, look what happens to the average. Okay? Now all of a sudden my average is going to be moved there because I've got one score down here that's really weighing it down. And this is something when you're analyzing student data, if you have one really low score and you look at your class average, now all of a sudden you're not really getting a good picture of where the class is at. Because let's say that this was like right here. Let's say that the class average was like, I don't know, like 84% or something. So you had a test and the class average was 84%. Well, if you got one kid in the class who scored super low, Now all of a sudden, that's going to bring down the average quite a bit. And so now this average looks like, oh, the class had a 75% average. They really bombed that test. Well, this one particular outlier here really threw off the mean or the average. So that's why sometimes the median can be very handy. And I'll just show you, because this also works the other way. What if I have an outlier in the really high end? Now, this outlier in the high end, he moves your average, and it looks like, hey, the class got a 90% average. And so that's not really an accurate measurement of where the class is. So when they were evenly distributed, the mean was a very good, teller of where the class was at. But when we had outliers, somebody who was really low or somebody who was really high, it really throws off that mean. And so that's why the median can be a really handy number, because the median never changes. Here is the median on all of these. Okay, it never changes. That is always the median. And look at where that median is. That median is probably about 83%. Are you guys feeling me on this?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's why you really do have to look at your student data. And when you're getting results back from a class test, and you've got to look for those outliers. If you have someone who is scoring really high or really low, then the class average may not be the best measurement of how the class as a whole is doing. And again, this really goes directly into assessment, because you need to figure out, all right, does the whole class, because if we're looking at something, you see, hey, the class average was 75%. We need to go back and we need to work on this. Well, maybe that might not be accurate. Maybe there's just one person in the class who really needs a lot of work on this, and the rest of the class is kind of on pace of where they should be. And again, if you've got one person who's really pulling everybody up, maybe the class actually needs to work on this, but one person's pulling the average way up, or a couple people are pulling the average way up, and those guys can kind of move on to something else, but then the rest of the class needs to review. So that's just one way that the difference between the mean and the median can be really handy. I'm just going to save and close that. So I'll make it really small here. All right, you guys still with me on that here?
Yep. Sorry, guys, our power just snapped out here in Bellevue.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's like...
We still see that, so your internet must stop looking. All right, so back to this, though. The next thing, I'm going to look on the note sheet here. And on the note sheet, I kind of want to talk about standard deviation as it relates to the mean, median, and mode. So right here, well, one of the things that we can see on our top chart with the average of 84 is we've got a fairly even distribution. All right, meaning that all of the points are none of the points are really far away from the mean. Whereas over here, we've got one point that's really far away from the mean, and over on the bottom one, we've also got another one that's really far away from the mean. And so what this is showing me is a high standard deviation. So if you guys look at this, if you're looking at my spreadsheet here, again, these are the grants, and I've got the mean on top. And so we can see that the mean was pretty close on all of these. They're all in that 36, 37 range. There are a few outliers. There's a 38, and there's one that's like a 32 down here. I think the 32 is like the stability ball grant. That wasn't anybody from this class. That was one that a lower grant that I purposely put in the mix just to see where it rated. But with regard to the standard deviation, a lot of these have a fairly low standard deviation. 1.1, there's a 2, there's a 1.9, a 3, a 1.6, a 3.9. And what that tells me is that as everybody rated these grants, the ones with the lower standard deviation, those ones mean that all of the scores that people scored them are very clustered together. And so I'm going to show you something here in a second with regard to student data, how recognizing the standard deviation can tell you a lot about your class. Now, one of the anomalies here that you see in yellow is we've got 3 or 4 here, and I had them highlight in yellow any of the grant scores that had a standard deviation above 5. That means that people were scoring them with a wide range of scores. And so now I go in and I look at those specific numbers and I see what happened here. And on these 2 grants right here, okay, they both were in like the 36 range, but when you look at the median, that middle number, they were very high, 38, 39, very highly rated. So when I look at these 2, these E and F right here, are you guys feeling me on this?
Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry, I feel like I'm just talking and I don't even see you guys behind the screen, so I got to kind of peek out at you every once in a while. But with regard to this data right here in column E and F, when I looked into the data, they both had scores that were abnormally low compared to all the rest of the numbers. I think in this one on E, one of the scores was like a 22, and no other score was even close to that. On the F, it had one that was like a 25. No other score was close to that. So that's telling me a couple things. One, someone just really didn't feel that that was a very strong grant. Or two, maybe they had an entry error when they were entering this into the form or whatever. So then, since this standard deviation is so high, I can actually look at the median, and this gives me a slightly more accurate overview of the grant. And when I look at E and F here, trying to dial me here. I'm gonna have to ignore that. I'm not really sure who's dialing me. 1 second.
Tony P. He's calling me too.
Oh, okay. He can just keep. I'm gonna encourage him to just keep looking. He's viewing online because he just can't talk back, so he's viewing online. I'm just gonna keep going because I don't want to keep us for too long here. But with regard to columns E and F, the main idea is that they had a really high standard deviation. When I dig into the numbers a little bit, I see that they had one test score that was really throwing them off. Now this can go the same thing too when you're kind of analyzing student data. Again, you're looking for those things, what's throwing this off? And sometimes if there's one or two numbers that are throwing it off, the median is a better measure of where the class is at. And in this case, the median is a better measure because grants E and F, I can tell you, when you look at like asking the class to talk about what were their favorite grants E and F were two of the favorites. So, but grants E and F don't show based on their means right here. They don't come up as the class favorites because in fact there's several that score a lot higher than them when we're looking at the data of the mean. But that's because they had really low numbers pulling them out. When we look at the median, we see okay, these ones actually did score higher than the majority of the grants. So that tells me, hey, I need to look at that data. Does anybody have? I'm going to flip over to you guys and stop the screen share for just a second here. And does anybody have any comments on the mean median mode as it relates to student data, or does it make sense to you, or do you have any questions about it? Oliver, I'm going to pick on you. Do you have anything that sticks out about that, or applies to, you think as it applies to student data and things like that?
No, it's just statistics can be skewed really easily by people, and you know, that's a great example of how the highest ones that were rated had the highest score of standard deviation because human error on data entry or just someone didn't like those two grants. So.
Yep. And so that's where, too, like when you have a grant committee, that's why I don't like to be the only one. Because I will tell you, if you look at the mean for every grant, I can tell you my scores on your grants, and I'll flip back over really super quick to the screen share on that, just so you can kind of see that again. I'm going to flip just to this one. If you look at just this right here, we've got 37, 36, 36, 36 across. My scores on pretty much all of these grants were 2 to 3 points lower. And that's just because I'm looking through it very critically, and I kind of knew going into it that my scores would be lower than probably what the class would be. Typically, you know, the class evaluation of them is just typically going to be higher. So I kind of assumed that, and I really gave my scores very pretty critical of each component. So anybody else? Kevin, I like the cat in the hat. Katie, Brian, or Amanda, Todd are back on here. Any guys else? Have you thought that maybe, hey, if I'm analyzing student data, have any of you think that maybe you've possibly made an error like that with regard to making a wrong conclusion based on class averages and things?
I'm surprised. Does Google Forms not do it automatically for you, or
what do you mean?
Compile data. I mean, you did it all yourself, of course, but doesn't Google Forms like by now have some way to compile all that data and put it? It
does. It puts it on a spreadsheet, but I just have to tell the spreadsheet to calculate the average and the median.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So, and that's all I did on that one. Mm-hmm. No questions on that? Okay. Well, I just wanted to show you really a quick example of that. I'm going to go back to the screen share. I'm going to show you how this directly relates to student data here. These are some screenshots from some actual test scores that are standardized scores from our different grades at Jesuit. And again, I've blinded the grades and everything. And these are really handy to look at. I'm going to increase the size on this a little bit so you can see it a little bit better. But this is one particular group. Again, their standard deviation at 9.5, that's in the medium to high range in terms of the testers. Now we can look at this, their mean. And so their mean and their median are fairly close. Because the mean is a little bit higher, that means I had a couple of guys who were scoring high and bringing up the average a little bit. But if you kind of look in here, this is really telling here because this is pretty good on the distribution here. 5 in the low average, 2 in the average, 4 in the high average. And that's a pretty normal distribution there of your test scores. And so we can see they're slightly higher than the 50th percentile. So the 50th percentile for the nation would be 234.5 on this group. Their average was 234.9. And their median was 232. So their median was slightly lower than the 50th percentile, but their average was slightly higher. This standard deviation tells me that there are some outliers in this class, and I know this class in particular. They had 2 students who were actually pretty low. They were probably closer to this like 21st percentile, but then another, some of those high flyers, they kind of balanced those out. So some of those guys who were nearing the 80th percentile really balanced that out. So this one is kind of I would say is a fairly normally distributed class. This class right here is going to be a class that has very high differentiation. So they've got this really high standard deviation. Look what we've got. We've got 2 in the lowest category. We've got 1 in the highest, 3 here. So this is a class that is really difficult to teach, and this is their math. You really have to group this class because they've got kids all over the map. You've got kids who are scoring above the 80th percentile. That means that this kid is a really smart kid, and he can take on some really challenging things in math. But in this same exact class, you've got kids who are way down here, and that's why that standard deviation is so high. If I just flip back and forth in between, look at here. I've got 5, 2, 4. That's a lower standard deviation. That's still a little bit high, but lower. Now when I flip back to here, I've got 2, 7, 2, 3, 1. They're all over the place. And that really tells you as a teacher, I need to group these guys and very deliberately. I need to do, and that's where you can use those tech components to really shrink the classroom. And that's going to be super, super important for this group. Now if I look at this group has a really low standard deviation. So this group right here has a standard deviation of 8.2. They had the lowest standard deviation. In fact, this class overall, they're pretty low as a class, and we can kind of see that here. They got 4 in the low, 2 in the low average, 4 in the average. Their mean 215 is pretty well below the 50th percentile, but they're actually an easier group to teach because right here they have their scores are more tightly packed. But even though they're on the lower end, you can at least teach them a little more whole group because they're tightly packed. Whereas this group over here, whole group stuff is not going to work very well for this particular group because they're so all over the place. And that's one of the things that as a teacher is going to be really important to look at. You guys are seeing what I'm talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I feel like I just explained a bunch of things, and I'm like, are they able to actually see this stuff I'm highlighting on the screen? So, but that's just a couple of things with regard to student data, and when you're looking at the scores from tests and those standardized test scores, that can really help you be very deliberate with how you're grouping students, how you're scoring students, and things like that. And then really quick, moving on here, zip down on that. The next thing on the agenda was just, we kind of went over how it applies to students, analyzing test scores and things like that. The next thing I'm going to go to is some grading things. And so I just want to share with you a couple of different things with regard to grading that I think can make your life a little better. And again, I'm going to switch over to the full-on screen share here with this. You're actually just going to go to this right here. So here we are back on this spreadsheet. And one of the biggest things that I think teachers kind of do wrong sometimes is everybody likes to score things as a percentage. And this is one of the things that I really am not a big fan of when teachers score things by percentage unless they actually weight them. So here's an example. Let's say that there is a quiz that you had just like walking out of class that was worth, there's 5 questions that had 5 points on it. And then later on you have a test that's worth, 50 points. And then later on, you have a big project that's worth 100 points. And let's say that you had a couple of other little quizzes along the way. Well, if we do this as a percentage, and let's say this is what the student got underneath it. So if the student got, 3 out of 5 on this one, 4 out of 5 on this one, 2 out of 5 on this one, and then 45 on this one, and then on their project, they just did a wonderful project, and they got 97 on that. Well, here's what their percentages look like. We got a 60%, we have a 80%, we have a 40%, we have a 90%, and we have a 97%. So these are 5 assignments that were completed. This was a project, this was a test, and this was just a daily. And unfortunately, what a lot of teachers do with this is they just enter everything as a percentage. And if we look at the average here of these particular percentages, oops, let me screw that up. Boom. If we look at the average of these percentages, look what we get. This student has a 73.4% average. If we just took the percentages, then that student would have a 73.4% average. However, if we take the points and we score everything as points, then I can sum all these up here, and I get 151, and I want to get that here. There we go, 151. So now let's look at this. Equals this divided by this. All right. If we took things by points, look what this becomes. Or actually, I'll just put a percentage. They either got a 73.4% or they got a 91.52%. So which one is the better representation of how this student did in the class? Well, on the test, they got 90%. On the project, they got 97%. That's measuring what they know on everything. Well, they had a couple of low daily grades. That means maybe like a homework assignment or whatever. But if you score them as percentages, that means that this student gets a 73.4%. If you score them according to points, in which the test has more points and the project has more points, then it now becomes this. So that's a mistake that I think a lot of teachers often make when they're scoring things. You have to, just from a mathematical standpoint, you have to be careful when you're scoring things. Now, what you can do in a lot of grading programs is weight some of this data, so the daily only counts as like 10% of the grade, and tests count as 50% of the grade, and projects count as 25% of the grade. But if you don't do that, then your student assessments are going to be off. So this might be a student who knows lots of stuff on the final test, does a great job on the final project, but if you just did it by percentages, they'd get 73.4%. If you do it by points, they get 91.52%. So that's clearly 2 different ways of looking at student data. I don't want to dwell on that, but just something, food for thought there. Just a quick note here, I'm going to stop this. Does anybody have anything that they would like to add with regards to student data? And when you score things, do you do things based on points, percentages, or weighted percentages? Anybody have anything to add to that when you're scoring things? Don't everybody answer at once, please.
Yeah, my experience with student grading is students have a tough time understanding weighting and how it works. So I've gone to points because they can calculate that often on their own by just entering it in a spreadsheet. I always get the question, what do I need to get on this to get the next grade up, or things like that. So points help quite a bit with that. But I've helped a lot of teachers set up their grade book, and their understanding of weighting is not very good and how it works.
Yes.
So I like points because it's simplified and students can figure it out. But you kind of have to know ahead of time what you're going to give as far as points, like your end amount and the values of tests and so forth. And then you can kind of break it down yourself on, the amount of tests that I give. Will it be worth 50% of the entire grade, or will it be worth 25%? So either way you do it, it's kind of a lot of work when you get started, but you find a system and then you kind of run with it. But I like points because students can kind of figure it out on their own.
Yeah, and one thing I just recommend is, with kind of echoing what you were talking about there, Oliver, is with regard to points, you just think about like, well, how much does this assignment, really count for? And even if the assignment was worth, maybe it was a worksheet that had 40 problems, when you enter it, what I do is, instead of putting in out of 40, just divide it by 4, and then it's out of 10. So if they got 30 out of 40, that's a 75%. You put 7.5 out of 10 in the grade book. And so, for instance, I did that with this class. The first project was not the most important project of the class. The first project was mostly kind of assembling things that we were working on in that first week of class. And so it was actually, the whole project on the rubric was worth 80 points. But when I enter it, I divide it by 2. And so it was only worth like 41 points when it goes into the grade book. And that way, I don't want that first project to be the most heavily weighted project. Like project 2 was worth 60 points. That's actually the most heavily weighted of the 4 projects that we do in this class, and that's designed specifically that way. So I strongly encourage you to do that sort of thing. And here's another thing that I recommend too, is for a lot of daily assignments, even if it's like a worksheet, again, that maybe it had 30 items on the worksheet or whatever that they had to do. For a lot of those daily sorts of things, I try and score them as a check, check plus, or check minus. And what I do is I use a 9-point scale, and if they get a check plus, that's equal to 9 out of 9, which would be an A, at least on our scale. And if they got a check, that would be 8 out of 9, which would be a B, or like an 87% or something like that on our grading scale. And then a 7 out of 9 would be a check minus, and that would be like a C on our grading scale. And I use that a lot in math because specifically for math, and this I think is a great thing for elementary or anybody who teaches math, is when you're scoring math, you're going to you do a lot of practice. And it takes a lot of practice sometimes to get concepts. So if you're doing long division, for instance, I hate when teachers give like 40 problems of something, because if you don't get long division after like the 5th problem, doing it 40 times the wrong way doesn't help the student. So you just assign kind of smaller problem sets, and then you can grade them in groups, small groups, or however it may be. But then if you just grade those instead of out of however many problems you did, you just grade it as a check, check plus, or check minus. And if they get most of the problems right and they really know it, I give them a check plus. If they're still working on it, I give them a check. And then if they really are struggling with it, they get a check minus. And what that allows me to do, and this can be applied to anything. So like if you have a daily response to like your social studies class, you just score like a journal entry as a check, check plus, check minus. And that way you don't have to have like a rubric to score everything. It's just a purely subjective. It's a smaller grade. It's not like a huge component. And then where you really get your differentiation in on your grades then is in the tests. So the tests you can score as larger really specifically. But on a lot of those daily assignments, just using like a check, check plus, or check minus can really make your life a lot easier in terms of scoring, and it can just make it simpler for the students. Because when they see check plus, they're like, hey, I did good, I'm excited, I got a check plus. And if they got a check minus, they're like, hey, I need to work on this. So it's a really easy indicator for students, and makes your life a lot easier. Anybody ever tried anything like that, or a similar different system, or just like daily grading that they would like to share or anything?
Nope. A lot of mine was through grade books, so a lot of it was done for me.
Okay.
I was student teaching, so I didn't have to do too much finagling with anything. One teacher, the U.S. teacher, did it with certain points, and he weighted his assignments and tests differently than my world history teacher, who just kind of put it all in as points. So, yeah. But grade book.
If you weight things, then the percentages are fine to use. I think just a lot of teachers struggle with the weighting, as kind of Oliver pointed out, and how much do you value certain assignments. And sometimes the setup of that in a grade book, for someone who's not really, math-oriented, can be a struggle. Whereas points is just, it's points. Points is points is points. So, all right, the last thing here that I wanted to go over is student data. And again, I'm going to be really quick on this. I just don't want to dwell on it. But this is the last thing I'll go over here. I want to show you this go back to the spreadsheet, because I've got a couple other tabs, or one other tab on the spreadsheet. In this specific tab, if you set up in a spreadsheet something that looks like this, are you guys, oops, I got to press share here, sorry. There we go, to everyone. All right, you guys got my screen now?
Yep.
Okay. So this is a spreadsheet, and I have this set up for every single one of my classes, where I just have the student names down here, and this would be their student usernames. And you can set up the student usernames, usually like first initial, last name. One thing I would add to it, though, is graduation year. And so, for instance, like mine, if I had like John Smith, he would be JMS, which is like Jesuit Middle School, J Smith, and then I put his graduation year, 2018. That's his username. And the reason for that is this is a databasing thing, but if you go to import student data into another website, you want to ensure that the username that your student has isn't already taken. Well, there's going to be a ton of J Smiths in any site that you go to, and there may very well be a J Smith 2018. But there may also be in your school, there may be JMS, J Smith, but he's in another class. He might be 2017. So that's how you can kind of distinguish who's the 4th grader, who's the 5th grader, by using the years. But it just helps from a formatting standpoint. In a databasing language, it's called a primary key. So you want to create something, a username that's going to be unique no matter where you go with it. Then you can just put in first name, last name, and a password. And the cool part is, for instance, for Diigo, you can create student accounts in Diigo. Well, if you guys look here, one of the options is you can import this as a CSV file. Same thing on Weebly. You can upload a CSV file of your students. And this just makes, now you have one set of data, and you can move this from place to place to place and put it in any kind of system that you want. So when you're in a Google spreadsheet, this is as simple as you create the format, and you go File, Download as CSV, comma separated values. And anything that you can put into a CSV, when you're using other websites that you can import data to, you can usually import them as a CSV file. And that really makes transferring data from place to place to place really easy. You could still use this on That Quiz as another place that you can use that. You can import users, you can import tests, so you could create a test on a spreadsheet and import that as a CSV. Again, Weebly, if you want to use that with your students, you can create and control their student accounts. And this is just a really handy thing. If you have one set of usernames and passwords for anything that you have students do, that can be huge in terms of just your workflow and getting them signed up for various things. So that's basically all I've got for today. Does anybody have any final thoughts that they would like to add? Nope. All right. I just want to remind you, I see a lot of people have already started to comment on the security and communication tips and tricks. So make sure that you get that completed, and also make sure that you get the Ed puzzles. Has anybody watched the Ed puzzles yet?
No.
Nope. Okay. Don't forget that those Ed puzzles are assigned to your Creighton account, so log in with your Creighton account, and that will get each of those Ed puzzles. So, and then I will send an email out today with some directions for the final project, which is mostly just a few final reflections, and then putting together some of the things that you've already created. So, any questions for closing out the class?
So the Ed puzzles, are these just due throughout the week? Well, when's the exact due date for just those two?
Trying to get I think the Ed puzzles have a due date of today or tomorrow. Probably tomorrow, I think, is when I set the due date for the Ed puzzles. And it's just one 10-minute video, one 2-minute video. And it's the same. It's actually the same thing, but just two different parts of the same speaker. So,
Okay.
All right. Any other questions or anything from anybody? Oh, sorry.
Sorry, for the final project, there's grant feedback from peers or whatever. What's that? Are you going to send us an email?
I'll explain it in my email. It's basically, you've already created it. It's just your feedback template, that you did where you scored everybody.
Yeah.
It's just going to be sharing that with me essentially.
Okay.
So you've really already got that. But I'll put that all in the email for you, and it should be good. But I really enjoyed working with you guys this semester. I hope it's been beneficial to you, and just those last couple components to complete, and we'll be all finished up. So please feel free to contact me anytime with any questions, and I will definitely contact you for any future collaborations or anything too. So be on the lookout for that, because I often will contact people from the class to collaborate on various things going forward. So I appreciate working with you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, I will sign off, and I'll probably shoot out a couple of emails in the next couple of days, just final reminders on things. But we're almost there. Just a few last things to complete. So appreciate working with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. See you later. Bye.
Bye.